The University of Louisville empowers students with over 50 fully online degrees and certificates in areas like business, public health, social work, engineering, and more. Flexible coursework allows time to focus on all of life's priorities. Learn more at louisville.edu/online.
From the University of Central Florida's Center for Distributed Learning
and the University of Louisville's Delphi Center for Teaching and Learning.
I'm Tom Cavanaugh.
I'm Kelvin Thompson.
And you are listening to Topcast, the teaching online podcast. Hello, everyone, and hello to you, Kelvin.
I got like bottom billing in that list.
Well, as do I think. I mean, because nothing's more important than our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
No one is more important than our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with that.
Yeah, let's cater and, patronize and all the things that it takes to get somebody to click your podcast.
Well, I mean, I like to think we're a little bit better than that. I mean, I think we're trying to provide some value, right? And people might agree, they might disagree, but at least they're sharpening the knife of their mind against the whetstone of our banterous, substantive conversation.
Well, I can't wait to hear the coffee because apparently the topic today is metaphors. Yeah.
Topic is always metaphors.
Well, I did see you sipping.
Uh-huh.
And, we always have our thematically chosen coffee.
Yeah.
I have some iced coffee that I'm drinking right now.
I really thought that was a baby bottle at first. I mean, like you're holding the thing.
Well, yeah. It actually is one that we would send to school with my son when he was young. So they've been around for a while. But no, it's got iced coffee in it. And not thematically chosen, to my knowledge. It's Starbucks Pike's Place. So.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Well, in my coffee mug today is a single origin Ethiopian Yirgacheffe natural process light roast coffee, if you're keeping score, from Just Love Coffee in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. It's a coffee roaster for a cause that then was followed up by a cafe venue. I happened to pick this up in one of their cafes in Valdosta, Georgia, but they're based in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. As I understand it, they've kept the main thing through donating proceeds from their revenue to support the cost of families adopting children, trying to make sure that kids find homes with parents who want kids and that kind of thing. So the coffee's pretty good. I actually, this part is not even intended as a connection, but I used my AeroPress coffee making apparatus. I've not dusted that off and used it for a few years, and it makes kind of a more intense, not quite espresso-like, but intense, somewhere between brewed coffee and espresso, more concentrated coffee. Pretty good. There was an attempt at a connection hidden in that soliloquy. I don't know if you want to try to find it or not.
I'm keying in on keeping the main thing, which I
Yeah.
think is kind of in line with our theme of today. I don't know. Am I in the ballpark?
Yeah, that's you were picking up what I was laying down.
Yeah, cool.
That's it. Shall I kind of give a little of the backstory about how we got here?
Yeah, you can get it started and I'll chime in.
Alrighty. So I think you and I agree on this, but you feel free to dissent. I think it's possible that we may be at something of a fork in the road inflection point in which some higher ed institutions lean into online and or digital education and others step away. And as a case in point, on the same day recently, 3 different publications passed into my inbox at the same time, they just got my attention because they were all right there, serving as case studies of varying approaches to online education. And I forwarded a couple, maybe all 3 to you. And so what do you think about this? And then we started talking about it and maybe this would be a good podcast episode. So that's kind of the setup. You want to add anything to that?
Well, I mean, obviously, we don't read too much into each of these case studies, but they do kind of, I think, point to broader trends, maybe a segmentation of the market in some ways, and certainly a good jumping off point for conversation about kind of like where we are, 5 years post-COVID in American higher ed with online and digital education. I think it's not a bad moment to put a finger in the wind and kind of see, which way the winds are blowing. And I think they're blowing in different directions for different institutions and kinds of institutions. And I think your inbox was, a bit indicative of that.
How do you want to proceed? Shall we? I want to try to take apart these pieces ad nauseum, but shall we say a word about kind of what was in them and kind of what we're making of that?
Yeah, sure. So maybe it would help for me to sort of frame it broadly, and then we can kind of drill in.
Yeah.
So as I read them, it seems like there are some institutions who post-COVID are leaning into online learning and seeing it as almost a requirement for serving the kinds of students that they serve, and not doing so could be existential for some kinds of schools, particularly tuition-dependent schools or schools that are serving a very particular kind of population. Yet at the same time, there's another kind of school that is pulling back from online learning, very intentionally and very explicitly saying, no, that's not what we're going to do, even though they may have been doing it during COVID or remote instruction during COVID. They've made a decision that, no, we're going back to what we were before. And I think what's different this time is the intentionality behind each of these very different kinds of decisions. Do you think that kind of fairly summarizes what we were seeing?
Yeah, and I don't want to call anybody out negatively or anything, but I think it does help to concretize a little bit. Maybe I'll come behind that and I'll just mention some of these pieces, and we'll put the pieces in the show notes for yourself. You can listen, dear listener, and see what you think. So the first one that got my attention, I think it was the first one that I opened, was from the Yale Daily News. And the headline was, Yale pushes for largely in-person courses, discourages asynchronous course requests.
Got your Edward R. Murrow voice going there.
That's right. Mr. and Mrs. America, which is kind of very, gender exclusive, whatever. Beyond the headline, the story seems to be really about in-person class attendance requirements. And the word asynchronous, as used in the story, really seems to be about access to video recordings of in-person classes. Right. Like our listening audience, you see the word asynchronous in a headline, you think it means something that I don't think it really means. But that's where I think a lot of people don't read past a headline. So I mean, that's a thing. And here's I promised we weren't going to get into the ad nauseum thing, but I love this quote, so I can't not just give the quote. So in the little piece in the Yale Daily News, right, an administrator, quote, explained that professors who would have otherwise recycled their recorded lectures for another semester is what, subquote, the university is probably not on board with.
Well, good, all right, way to go, Yale, take a stand. So that's an example of one of these institutions that's pulling back from.
Right.
You want to dig into this a little bit before we go to the other kind, or did you want to kind of lay the groundwork for the other stories first?
Okay, I'll bite. So here's what got me about that, right? And maybe this is my own bias. So you be the rudder to my tumultuous, storm-tossed Zodiac raft. The first thought I had, Tom, was when I looked at this was, well, as go the Ivies, right? Go a certain proportion of the rest of higher education. certainly American higher education, but maybe more broadly as well. I mean, there's a certain amount of, well, if the Ivy League schools are doing it, that must be an indicator of what we should be about.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And that worries me a little bit because, again, I think most people aren't going to read past the headline.
Yeah.
Oh, Yale steps away from asynchronous.
Yeah. I think, so I have a hot take on this one.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah. So, but part of it, so I'm of two minds. And I'll talk about the part that kind of agrees with you for the first half of my mind, which is,
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's a scary place inside between my ears. I agree that the Ivies get an outsized proportion of media coverage and attention based upon their actual enrollment. It's ridiculous, the amount of ink that these schools get versus the number of students that they serve. They just, they're just famous, right? So they get all the attention. And so, by virtue of that, they do have a certain amount of influence because of that. And so it's unfortunate in one sense that a school like Yale with that platform and, media spotlight and everything else that it's going to draw would make a decision like that, which could potentially cause others to question the rest of us. All right, so here's a hot take. But I don't care. Let them go. I'm not competing with Yale. Yale can be Yale all they want. They got their own problems, believe me. And that's not what they're about. And if they want to make their experience on campus the thing, well, that's a differentiator for them.
That's right.
UCF and Louisville aren't going to compete with. Right. So, but we're going after a different kind of student. And Yale can have their students, but we want all the rest.
Well,
everybody else who
so
needs access. And so I sort of feel like, let them go off on their Ivy Island and do their special thing. And I sound a little bit dismissive, and I don't mean it because I have a lot of respect for those schools, and I know people at a lot of those schools. But they're serving a different population, and they have a different purpose. They're not doing what I think we're doing. And what we're doing is much broader, and I think has actually more impact on more people, more socioeconomic mobility, more just real life impact. So, I think there's room for a lot of different flavors, different colors in the crayon box for these different kinds of institutions to make different strategic decisions about who they want to be. I may have mentioned before, I don't know if it was on the podcast or I may have just told you personally, that my nephew went to an Ivy League school. It was not Yale, but it was a different Ivy school. And he's a brilliant kid. And he had I don't know how many AP credits from high school. He took AP tests for classes he didn't even take and passed them. This is so he came in with like more AP credits than is actually really possible. But when he showed up at this Ivy League school, they told him, we don't accept any of them. All it did was allow him to maybe place into a higher level class. It counted as a prereq maybe. And it's because they think about the student population going to a school like that they want, everybody comes in with that kind of an academic profile and all of these credits and all of that stuff. They want people on campus for 4 years. And it's not about the money, I don't think, because they got more money than they know what to do with at these schools. But they want people for the experience. That's the value proposition that a school like that offers. And if you are having them, at home in the dorm or in an apartment watching recorded lectures, you're not getting that thing that you are claiming is your value proposition. So I kind of get it, and I don't blame them. And I think there's room for all of us in the various ecosystem of higher ed. I don't know. Is that a hot take or not?
Maybe so, but I don't disagree with that. I mean, you and I've talked a couple different contexts, maybe on mic before about this, right? That I'll just pick up one of the threads that you said, which is, I think institutions are going to need to further differentiate now and in the future. And I suspect that some won't survive, right? And I think the more that institutions lean into their value differentiation, the more they're likely to survive, right? Because they've got something unique to offer.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in that sense, I do not fault Yale for being Yale. That's fine. And I suppose I don't fault the hypothetical, I hope there aren't many, but the hypothetical institutions that follow like lemmings behind and over the cliff, right? I hope they don't, but I mean, in that sense, I mean, you do you too. But
yeah, we don't need an Atlantic article, describing how this is the way it should be because Yale did it. That's not helpful, right?
No, but I agree with you. I think there's so many other students available for the rest of us to try to serve well. And the other two pieces that crossed my inbox are kind of the antithesis in a sense. And I guess here's what I would say about them. Maybe I can do this briefly and then we can kind of treat them together. So one piece was about a distinct institution and that you could kind of draw a line of demarcation, between like how people might interpret that Yale headline and then what this other institution's doing. And then the third piece was more of a thought piece about advocating strategy. So the second and the third piece are of a kind. The second one is really about the University of Illinois Chicago. It was in a UIC campus news source, and the headline was University of Illinois Chicago's online initiative expands access and opportunity in online learning. I mean, that almost doesn't sound like news, really. I mean, like, well, duh, whose doesn't, right?
Right.
But then the piece is pretty good because it speaks to some like campus reorganization and they're really redoubling their efforts. And the chancellor has a quote and some other academic leaders have a quote. And they're really speaking to, what I'd call the takeaway, is an institutional commitment to more accessible, flexible, and high-quality online degrees meeting the evolving needs of working professionals. And interestingly, they put a lot of emphasis on video and multimedia, so maybe there was a video element between the Yale thing and the UIC thing. But I thought it was really good that, okay, we're making some internal tweaks and we're redoubling our efforts and we're doing this thing. But then the third piece is author Jeff Selingo with an endorsement and a foreword by the president of ASCU, the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. The title of this piece is Strategies for Building Online Learning at Regional Universities, How Once Strictly Place-Based Institutions Can Grow into Their Next Era of Development. So we could call that, don't be the lemmings and follow the neo-traditional approach. You be you, but amplify it with an intentional online strategy. That's my attempt to summarize those other two. One, do you think that's true to the pieces? And then two, hey, let's talk about it.
Yeah. Yes, I do think you've done a really good job of summarizing two longer pieces, and kind of placing them in context to each other, and in contrast to Yale. I do think this is, again, continuing this trend that I think is more prevalent than what Yale's doing kind of post-COVID, of institutions recognizing that if they didn't have an online strategy before COVID, they need one now. Or if they did, they need to be more intentional about it, because there's the demographic cliff that has been predicted, the vast numbers of non-traditional students, adult learners that are out there. It dwarfs the number of traditional age students, especially as that population potentially shrinks. The number of stop-outs out there who've got some college but no degree. All of them are people that potentially need an education that online learning can serve. So yeah, I think that this is a real trend. But I will say, I think if all three of these fall into a broader category that we've talked a lot about, and that I always kind of go back to what I learned from Joel Hartman when he was here at UCF, which is that if you're gonna do online learning, or let's say not do online learning, it needs to be in the service of the academic mission. You have to know why you're doing it or not doing it. It has to be intentional. Yeah. And it feels like, these Yale, UIC, and then these kind of regional comprehensives are all falling into that kind of, all right, we are doing something on purpose, which is better than not, right? Or having it done to you, or guessing, or whatever,
Right. Yeah, in that sense, none of them are lemmings, right?
Right. Yeah.
None of those are lemmings. And I think maybe see if you agree with this, maybe that's part of the gist of this conversation, right? Is if you can avoid it, don't be a lemming, right? Don't be a lemming and fall off the demographic enrollment cliff, right?
Right.
Have your own intentional strategy that aligns with your academic mission.
Yeah, and I think I may have mentioned this on the podcast before. But if I did, it was 10 years ago. I probably did. But I remember when Arthur Kirk was president of St. Leo, and St. Leo has had a pretty large online program. It serves military students. It has traditionally anyway. But the campus itself is it's a beautiful little campus in West Central Florida that it's got like rolling hills and kind of a Mediterranean feel, and like 2,500 students or something. I don't remember exactly what the number is. I'm sure I'll get an email after this. But I remember an interview with President Kirk where he said, like, we weren't going to compete with the other Catholic schools like Georgetown and Notre Dame and Boston College. And so we couldn't climb that ladder. So what we did is we built a new ladder. And so they developed an entirely new strategy for themselves, leveraging online learning and their military relationships to kind of forge their own thing. It's very similar to what Paul LeBlanc did at Southern New Hampshire. He just leaned into it. And I think Kirk at the time took all their deferred maintenance budget and spent it on building online courses. It was a risk, but it was an intentional one, and one that had strategy behind it. And I think that's sort of your point. Don't be a lemming. Think about what you need for your institution, what your unique context is, what your objectives are, and kind of lean into it. And it might be, we've talked about this before too, like, maybe you're a seminary or a faith-based institution, or you're like a military academy or something. Maybe it doesn't make sense for you to have a large online program, depending upon your institution.
But know why you're doing or not doing.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's right. I can't not say this though. Strategy, yes, good. Meeting the needs of a growing diverse group of potential learners, right? Post-traditional, stop-outs, some college no degree, all that. But do it well. but do it well. Support it. We've had a couple of recent episodes when we talked about helping others, the uninitiated, grasp what good online course is. And we had Tom Tobin on, and we referenced this quote between Joe Moreau and Phil Hill about the best instruction is fully resourced instruction, regardless of whether it's in person, online, or whatever. Do it well. Fulfill your values. Budget accordingly, staff accordingly, set up policies and practices accordingly. Make sure you're delivering on a promise, not just not just being a slick fly-by-night operation that thinks it's
Right.
going to generate enrollments as a cash cow or something.
Right, and I think that's the key. That last thing you said. Again, I'll quote Joel. He used to say all the time that have a real mission-oriented reason why you're doing what you're doing, and you do it well, and you execute. The money should follow, right? If everything's in alignment. And the very worst reason at the top of the list of doing online learning is quote unquote generate revenue. Because how many times have you kind of heard that? And it's backwards. You need to be doing it for some other reason, and hopefully revenue is one of the projected and anticipated outcomes. But it's only going to come if you do it right. And
Yes.
Too often you put that cart before the horse, and if we build it, they will come is a huge fallacy. And we've got some high-profile examples of where that just didn't work. So I think you're 100% right. Do it well, and then there's all kinds of goodness that flows from that.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Anything else you think we ought to say about either these case studies or the broad topic?
Well, I think the way you've sort of shined a spotlight on it for me, and maybe it's just by the kismet of your inbox that day, is forcing me to kind of think about this going forward as I look at what's happening at various institutions and how I will, kind of think about their success or failure or what the broader trends in the space are. I think this definitely bears watching.
Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, right? But it feels like there's a lot of things going on right now that are causing folks to either make value-aligned decisions about strategy or not. And then it's okay if those value-aligned strategies go one way or the other, but have a values-aligned strategy rather than not having one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. With that, my coffee's getting low in my water bottle. Do you want to try to put a bow on it?
Sure. By way of summation, we might say some institutions may be stepping back from online education. Others may be looking for online education to disappear as a nominal category. We really didn't talk about that a ton, but I mean, that is an implication as well, right? It's just learning is learning. Let's not worry about it. So it's not a strategic imperative anymore. Some are really leaning into. There is nevertheless a strategic imperative to meet the needs of our learners. And to your point, for the great majority of us, that's probably the needs of post-traditional learners through high-quality online courses and programs. How's that for an awkward summation?
No, it's good. Yeah, I'd be really curious to hear what our listeners think about this, what's happening at their institutions, and what they are observing and experiencing. So feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. All right. Until next time, for Topcast, I'm Tom.
I'm Kelvin.
See ya.